YouTube, what the crap's going on? Heir of Kislev here, and I'm going to be bringing you some action with Dov plays. He's going to be rolling the Dark Elves. I'm going to bring a variant of an army that Indy used against me in a couple of battles back. I did not expect it to be great or perfect in this matchup against the Dark Elves, but I expected maybe it would be unexpected, right? I expected it to be unexpected. Wow. I've got a way with words, folks. I'm amazing. In any case, I brought a Kislev army that is basically just a crap load of archers, a Streltsy for some AP, some Lancers, and Snow Leopard for a little bit of movement. I've got an Ice Witch that I meant to have on a mount, and I screwed that up, so she's on foot. And I'm still getting used to the interface on Warhammer 3, and I've got a Patriarch for some heals, and a little extra bear damage. A little Grom because I was hoping to pick off cavalry models. And so I knew the Dark Elves would have to bring like Cold One Knights and stuff like that, and maybe crossbow riders. And he did bring the crossbow riders. My war sleds are doing a good job of skirmishing them right now. And the little Grom is some juicy bait, right? And it's baiting Dov in. It's going to bring him into bow range here momentarily. He brought in his light cavalry first, so I countered it with the wing lancers, which should do just fine here. But he is backing it up with a Feral Manticore, which is going to be a little bit problematic. The Manticore does a lot of damage. It's a little bit squishy, but does a lot of damage quickly, especially if your units don't have much armor. Now the Lancers, of course, with the cat in here, are going to do very, very well against Dark Riders. You're going to have a pretty impressive performance, and then we were able to do some very nice damage here initially. However, what is going to be difficult for me is just this stack of Dread Spears and Bleak Swords. Now, Bleak Swords have gotten a pretty significant buff as of Immortal Empires. They have more weapon damage. I think 10 of it was AP whenever Dov was looking at it. They're a more impressive unit. They will defeat a lot of other lower-tier infantry and put up a pretty healthy fight even against some mid-tier infantry. So I wouldn't write them off at anything. So my initial defense went well. Except for the Manticore, who came in and started kind of turning that around a little. I was trying to shoot it and hopefully berserk it, but he is just KOing my cat, because the cat does not have armor, and the Manticore is very well suited to that fight, so the cat ended up being a pretty poor pick for me. And I don't even remember if Indy used that in his build, because like I said, I kind of copied this build. I've got to deal with Malekith and I have to deal with a lot of infantry. My hope was, if I could somehow do okay in the cavalry engagement, honestly, I should have started just running away with a bunch of these archers, but at this point, like, I could see that I'm really going to struggle here with my right flank. Like, these Cold One Riders got in, I'm running out of options to block them because of what that Manticore did to me. Fortunately, it did berserk, and I've now got Malekith down here, and I have some tools for hurting Malekith, but Malekith's not easy to kill. So I go ahead and throw in some of my last single entities here to hold. One of them is the Patriarch, and then I'm going to basically just try and hold Malekith and shoot him. I'm bringing my Ice Witch over because I was hoping to kind of dump a Hailstorm into some of the enemy cavalry, and you can see the enemy cavalry is there, but I was looking in the wrong spot. I was kind of looking over here too, and I didn't get a Hailstorm dumped yet, and I should have, because I would have started to do some damage against the cavalry, but honestly, a better spell against the cavalry might have just been Blizzard rather than the Hailstorm, because it's a standstill. I forget sometimes that they've buffed Blizzard, and it acts more like Pit of Shades, and you can use it to pretty good effect against cavalry that's stuck in a fight and take it out. But anyway, now my army's just falling apart. And so I knew this, and that was part of the reason I picked this build. I was choking with Dov. I was like, this is either going to be spectacular or go down in a spectacular defeat. And at the moment, it's spectacular defeat. But it's fun to try these kind of things. It had been tried against me successfully by Indy Pride against my Skaven. Quite successfully, I might add. But Skaven are a different animal. And so I wanted to try it here because I knew it would be tougher to pull this off against the Dark Elves. But at the same time, I also knew it would be kind of fun to just try it and see what happens. And what's funny is that after the battle was over, I was actually left with quite a few questions. And some people might think that the first question that was left in my mind was, why am I an idiot and I brought this build? That question's easy to answer because I'm me. But in any case, no, the questions were more of, I wonder how different combinations of Kislev cavalry trade with Dark Elves. And part of the reason I brought this crazy build was because my brain, just being what it is, and again, I guess I can't explain that brain, I was thinking, you know what, I just cannot see Warbears trading well into Cold One Riders. It's like, I think that's going to be a poor trade. I would think the Cold One Riders would probably get a lot of value, and the Warbear Riders might win, but only just. And so that was part of the reason why I didn't bring, when I first started picking my army, I'd actually picked like 6 armored Cassars without the great weapons, because I was like, that'll be hard for Bleak or Dread Infantry to chop through, and they have pistols they can shoot with, which are a nice defense against skirmishy stuff. And then I was like, I'm going to bring a couple of those, maybe some Warbear Riders, and I was like, man, I don't know how this Warbear Rider thing is going to trade. And then I didn't really like Kislev's magic, how it stacks up against the Dark Elves. Like, I don't think it's very impactful. But, I think Blizzard probably is the best spell, because it can effectively get a hold of some of the Dark Elf cavalry while it's in a fight. So it just left me wondering, how do some of these units match up? And so Dav was kind enough to join up in some battles with me afterwards where we could do some unit testing, and we had some curiosities. How does Kislev's shock cavalry trade into Cold One Knights? So if the worst happens and you have to block Cold One Knights, how does it go? So let me load up the replays and the first thing we wanted to see was how those Warbear Riders performed. Now, Dav and I both were of the impression that the Warbear Riders would win, but probably not convincingly enough. But I mean, holy cow, like as soon as these fights got started, both of us were kind of stunned. I mean, the Warbear Riders have a much lower charge than the Cold One Knights. They have the fewer models, right? There's way fewer models. They didn't tend to lose their models as easily, whereas the Cold One Knights did, because each model has a lower health pool, and so they just shredded them. And again, this is something I've got to train my mind for. Dav also brought Cold One Dread Knights, which have been much improved in Immortal Empires, but basically they just died slower and more expensively. So, there you go. Error, wrong again. Big surprise, right? Here I am, wrong again. I didn't think Warbear Riders would be a good trade. They were an excellent trade, and then they would have been good after this to help take down Malekith. So I'm a dunce. So in this case, Warbear Riders probably are a pretty solid pick. Against the Dark Elves, they will be your anti-large tool. Now, it's not to say the Dark Elves don't have other tools that would be a real pest for the Warbear Riders. I think you're going to have to protect them with, horse archers, but better yet, probably sleds. You're probably going to need a unit of sleds to protect against stuff like Scourge Runner Chariots. I think Scourge Runner Chariots are going to be kind of a nasty pick against Kislev. And then, of course, your enemy may not stack up Dread and Bleak Infantry like Dav did against me earlier. There's other options for infantry from the Dark Elves, potentially. So the Dark Elves are one of those factions that they're not really a master of anything, but they have pretty good everything. And so they're interesting in the sense that they could bring a lot of different looks. So you're not always going to get the same look from the Dark Elves. So this testing that we'll do here will test some different unit combos, not all of them. This matchup. Let's hit play. I'm going to run some Lancers headlong into the Cold One Knights. Now, this time we predicted, of course, that the Cold Ones would win. We just didn't know by how much, or, could the Lancers potentially do enough damage that this is kind of worth it as a last-ditch effort to stall. Because Lancers are only 850 and Cold One Knights are 1,000. But you can see on the charge, the Lancers deal massive damage. Like, they do a ton of damage, but then it just kind of dies after the charge is over. Again, this is as expected. And the Cold One Knights just start chewing their way through because they've got anti-large and they've got the AP. Now, we're going to do the same thing with Griffin Legion. And I didn't know exactly what to expect here because the Griffin Legion is a little stronger, has an even stronger charge. And again, on the charge, they deal some serious damage into the Cold One Knights. At least the other two did. This one, the charge bugged out. So, rest in pieces, sweet Griffin Legion. Yeah, you can see the Griffin Legion punched really hard at first, but let's just keep watching these fights and see how those go. And look at this over here. So the Cold One Knights were not able to hold together here. This kind of makes me curious over here what would happen if you got an Ice Sheet cast and slowed down the Cold One Riders and ruined their charge entirely with the Griffin Legion. Could they actually get in and finish this? But then, even though that damage was really good at first, the answer I don't think is a yes, because look how the Cold One Knights turned that around. Like, so this was never an engagement that I expected to be great, but it was more of a curiosity for me. What happens if you end up head-to-head with them? And the answer is it's not good. It is good with the Warbear Riders, but it's not good with the other cavalry. So the other cavalry, of course, the Griffin Legion, the Wing Lancers, especially Wing Lancers. Wing Lancers are going to be an excellent choice for dealing with cheap Dark Elf infantry, as far as dealing charge damage to them and pulling out and cycling back in, dealing with crossbow riders, dealing with Dark Riders, all that kind of stuff. Not the crossbow variant, standard Dark Riders. And I've got one more replay, so let me load that, and then we'll keep talking. All right, so yeah, that's where we were talking through. I'm sure I already forgot what I was talking about a moment ago, but in this last test, I wanted to see this. I had an interesting idea. The combination of Wing Lancer and Snow Leopard is actually just, I think, a hair cheaper than a Griffin Legion, maybe, because it was $850 and $650. It was $1450. No, they're a little more expensive, huh? Yeah, because $850 and $650, so you're at $1,450, yeah, $1,500. So it's a little more expensive than the Griffin Legion, and it's a little cheaper than Bear Cavalry. And I wanted to kind of use them in tandem, see, like, you know, can I spoil the charge of a Cold One Knight? Can you combine them, or can you charge Cavalry first and follow up with Cat? Do any of those end up any good? And this one over here on the right looked promising at first. This was Cat charges first, followed by Lancers. Now, again, this takes a lot of micro, and there's other factors that came into play. Like that Manticore absolutely collapsed my Cat in that battle. So there's obviously going to be risk for bringing the Cat. The Cat is very low armor, and I think is going to have pretty limited use. There's definitely going to be a niche where the Cat is good, but I'm not convinced this is it. But as we watched, like, this fight was going heavily in the favor of my forces, and I was like, all right, surely I'm going to win this one on the right. The one in the middle didn't look that bad. But let's just keep watching these, see how these turn out. I think you're going to be surprised. So again, these look like it should be a pretty easy victory. Now I'm spending a whole lot more here, right? I'm at 1,500 gold versus 1,000. This is 50% more spend. So my forces would need to win this running away. And on the right hand, it went all right. They blocked the charge of the Cold One. I sacrificed an entire Wing Lancer, but you get away with a Cat. Is that a good sacrifice? No, honestly, it's not, because now the Cat is only a single entity with low armor. And if it has to deal with crossbows or other things, like, I think it's going to be poor. It could be a good supplement against a big character like Malekith, but yeah, I don't think that's a good trade at all. And then over here, the Cold One Knights are starting to slap this Cat in the face. They're going to take him to the local shelter and turn him in as a stray. I mean, these Velociraptors are having none of this Cat's crap. So yeah, they are turning that fight around, and they were very low. And then this one over here is looking even worse, because there's 15 Cold One Knights left there up against that Cat. So the low armor, and yeah, I mean, it's brutal. They turned that around on the Cat, and they both ended up routing, but they did win that fight. So that is an incredible value for the Cold One Knights right there. I mean, just check this out. Let me go look at the kills. 1345 value on the Cold One Knights, so that is some good stuff. This one over here is already at 1227. And finally routes, but again, not a good trade that way either. Not a great spend either, because it costs more, but it was just a curiosity on my part. Can the Cat combine with cheaper cavalry to make an effective combination? And the answer is no. Doesn't look like it. So then we wanted to test one final thing. I brought a bunch of armored Cassars, both great weapon and standard. There's 3 of each. I've interlaced them. And they're going to be going up against Dread Spears and Bleak Swords. And I'm putting them in different formations. I did screw up the fire at will, where they're not going to get quite 2 full volleys like they probably would in a regular fight, but it's not going to change the outcome a ton. You'll see what I mean by that. I did a couple of blocky formations to see if this, does it help block the charge. Now, this is probably never feasible in a multiplayer match, because if you do this, someone's going to punish you for it bad. This makes you very vulnerable to artillery and missiles and magic, and you're already pretty vulnerable to magic, but I just wanted to see. So it's blockiest, middle spread, and full spread. And I've alternated the units where it's a great weapon and a standard, every other one. The silver shield of the Dark Elf Infantry gives them very nice missile protection from the armored Cassars. And the question here was just, which one is really better in the end, right? Now, holding a pistol in their hand, a shield is obviously good in a lot of ways against the Dark Elves because they have plenty of missiles. But at the same time, a pistol is kind of a protection of a sort, right? Because some things can't risk getting too close or else they get shot with the pistol. It's not as good as a shield in terms of just literally blocking missiles, but it is some deterrent to units with relatively limited range, such as crossbow cavalry, from just picking you apart. Now, I expected the great weapons would do a whole lot better in melee, but let's just take a look at the stats on these units. So the Cassar great weapons are, if you take a look at their melee defense, it's 32. So it's 36, 32, 36, and the AP is pretty good here. It's at 25. And if we take a standard unit, this one over here, it's 32, 38, 32. So they get better melee defense because they're carrying a shield, and then lower weapon strength, but still 9 AP. So it's not terrible. It's not great. But honestly, if you look at across the board here, the Armored Hussars are putting up a better fight. All the units would shoot some from the rear ranks if you put them on defensive, so I think that the play is you always want these on defensive in pretty much any matchup, but certainly against the Dark Elves here. Look at this one. The Bleak Sword is just going to straight up beat this Great Weapon where it got its full charge. Now, the Great Weapon does have 20 charge bonus, which is quite a bit more than the standard variant here. You can see there's only 12, so you probably want to countercharge after shooting if you're bringing the Great Weapon variant. However, I tend to think just the standard Hussar is going to be better. They fought better in the head-to-head matchup here, and were more difficult to be killed because of the higher melee defense. Plus, they get the Buyer Blood, which is going to give them some extra time to hold on in a fight. Look at this. Bleak Sword twice just crumped the Armored Hussars who didn't charge them. Now, I don't know how much difference it makes if you countercharge. Probably a pretty fair difference. This charge bonus of 20 is really not bad for kind of a mid-tier infantry. We decided to give the Bleak Swords an honorable death here, so I ran them down with one of my Winged Lancers, but even still a pretty impressive showing with those Bleak Swords there, considering how damaged they were. Yeah, this test ended up being kind of interesting. Bleak Swords are just good. Bleak Swords are a nice unit. They have 10 AP, and their damage, out of the 30-some-odd damage they deal, 10 of its AP, which is really not bad. That's slightly more than what you saw on the Armored Hussars. Their cost is pretty good. Now, their armor is really low at only 30, but there's going to be some factions that really struggle with that. Like Empire can't just trade swordsmen into the Bleak Swords anymore. That's not going to work. So those units are just better now. And you can see they have a pretty honorable showing here, but as far as builds go, it looks like I would have been better off to just bring some Armored Hussars with shields, a Bear Rider or two in order to help protect myself, some sleds, and then some other ranged units and heroes. So it feels like that would have been the play. And as far as magic goes, I think Blizzard is the best pick. Maybe try and get a blob going somewhere and then drop the Blizzard on it to get rid of enemy cavalry. And then, maybe you could go with, I'm trying to remember, is it Death Frost, which does damage against Malekith. Some of the Druchii Lords can heal. Still wouldn't hurt to put the extra damage out on them from magic damage, but they can heal. So it makes it a little more tricky to pull off, per se. But there you go. That's a little bit of Druchii Dark Elf matchup. It doesn't cover the whole matchup, but I hadn't played this one yet. My YOLO build, of course, flopped. But then, even when something flops, you can learn something from it. So I obviously learned that build would need some serious adjustment if you wanted to bring it against the Dark Elves. Whereas a build very similar to that ended up being very problematic for my Skaven. I say similar. It wasn't exactly the same. Indy basically brought Griffin Legion, Wing Lancers, and sleds and other stuff like that. Kept his archers and Little Grom way back. I did not bring a Warp Lightning cannon, which, come to think of it, I probably should have. And so when he used it against my Skaven, I got absolutely swatted. And so it ended up being really rough. But in this case, it didn't work out against the Druchii, but it was fun to go do these tests. So sometimes you got to challenge the way you're thinking. I mean, I thought for sure that Warbear Riders would be a poor trade into Cold Ones, because I've seen Cold Ones trade pretty well into other monstrous cavalry like Demigryphs. They don't usually win that fight, but they can trade okay sometimes. They did not trade well at all. They got skunked by the Warbear Riders. So it was an interesting one, and I was definitely wrong in my thinking, and I'm glad that I got to test it, because that would have continued to be a fallacy in my head of how that matchup goes. Anyway, I hope you all enjoyed this one. HeirofCarthage signing out for now. I'll see you all soon with some more action in Total War Warhammer 3.